So we're going to change gears a little bit and we're going to talk about the cancer care revolution. And I'm going to introduce our panel. And while I do that, I just wanted to remind you that you can ask questions of the panel as well. So just jump onto Slido now. There's the QR code in the program. You can submit questions throughout this panel discussion. And I might just get you to stand up for a minute because we've been sitting for quite a while, if you don't mind, while I introduce our panel. I'll get them to come up. We have, and you can give them a round of applause too, Professor David Thomas, the Director of the Centre for Molecular Oncology at the University of New South Wales and the Chief Science and Strategy Officer at Omico. Welcome, David. I'll have this one. Other one's fine. We have Associate Professor Seth Cheetham. He's a Group Leader at Australian Council Research Fellow at the Australian Institute of Bioengineering and Nanotechnology. And as you'll hear, he was recently awarded a $3.3 million grant to establish Australia's first Centre for Personalised mRNA cancer vaccines. Associate Professor Rachel Conyers is a clinical lead of bone marrow transplant. Oh, you can sit down. Sit down. Thank you. In bone marrow transplant at the Royal Children's Hospital and Group Leader of Cancer Therapies at Murdoch Children's. She's welcome. And last but not least, we have Dr. Demi Karikios, medical oncologist and head of department at Nepean Hospital. And he has a particular interest in the cost and value of cancer drugs and particularly about financial toxicity. So give them all a big round of applause while I come over. So don't forget, you can get your questions in as well. Otherwise, I've got a whole lot here to ask. But we're going to get straight into it and ask, okay, Seth, let's start with you. You were recently awarded, as I mentioned, a $3.3 million grant to establish Australia's first Centre for Personalised mRNA cancer vaccines. So what excites you the most about this approach to treating cancer?
Yeah, personalised cancer vaccines are really an emerging technology that's pretty transformative. So it's a very new way of treating cancer. And you've heard a lot today about personalised medicine, and what personalised medicine really means to most people is using technologies like genomics to find the best matching drug for an individual. Personalised cancer vaccines are actually about creating a drug for a single individual. So the way that they work is to basically teach your immune system to better recognise the difference between cancer cells and healthy cells. So they're usually used in combination with drugs like immunotherapies and checkpoint inhibitors to basically prime your immune system to better be able to find and eradicate cancer cells from your body. So it's a really powerful and new form of technology that's really been enabled by the mRNA cancer vaccine revolution.
Amazing. And what are the challenges in delivering these types of personalised treatments, and how close are we to that as a clinical availability in Australia?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a lot of the leaders in this field are the same leaders behind the mRNA COVID vaccines, so companies like Moderna and BioNTech. And so the furthest advanced trials in this are in phase 3 trials in melanoma already in Australia. So by the end of the year, we could have outcomes of those trials, which will be the first confirmation that this technology really does work and improves patient outcomes. If that drug is then approved, then we'll see that rollout of that throughout the community. And it's a very challenging new kind of modality at every level. So for the clinical trials, rather than each person in the trial being split into 2 arms where they get 2 different treatments, every person is getting a different molecule. And those molecules may never have been specifically evaluated in an animal before. So it's a very new way of doing medicine. So there's a lot of challenges on the logistical side and the manufacture side and the implementation side that still need to be ironed out. But it's a very exciting time to work in this field.
It sounds fascinating. And Rachel, just in the paediatric space, how is paediatric cancer care changing with precision medicine and pharmacogenomics?
Yeah, so I think many people in the room know about the Zero Childhood Cancer Program, which primarily is looking at the genomics that drive your cancer. My research and my lab's research is focused on genetic changes that alter how you respond to a medication. Remembering that whilst there are cancer therapies, there are a multitude of supportive care medications that we use, antibiotics, anti-vomit medication, analgesics, all of which have international prescribing guidelines. So one of our big programs that we've run throughout Australia has shown that in children, When we screen for these genomic variants, over 90% of children have a high-risk variant, and 30% of them warrant a medication change or an alteration in their dosing immediately.
So when you do that test, so you'll immediately change what they're going to be given?
Correct, correct. So big impact, but the challenge is how you then implement that beyond the MRFF funding.
And so what gives you the most hope for the future? Is it the fact that you can do that test and then immediately make those clinical changes to hopefully optimise outcomes for your younger patients?
Yeah, so I think what gives me the most hope is not only curing the cancer, but making the whole experience, particularly the supportive care elements of it, better. We know that long-term, 60% of children have long-term adverse drug reactions related to their cancer and supportive care medication. So it's to improve survivorship, we actually need to think about that up front and the side effects.
And I did an event for the Kids Cancer Project last week, actually,
Yeah.
and this is a big issue. We talked about that although the survival rates for children are increasing, that a lot of them are left with long-term problems in survivorship, health problems.
Absolutely.
So we'll come back to you, Rachel, in a second, but I just wanted to go to Demi to talk about the growing cost of cancer care. We heard from Kevin about how much money he and Caitlin have had to spend, in some cases, with no benefits whatsoever. How should we think about and evaluate the value of new therapies, both clinically and economically, given some people are having to spend a lot of money?
Yeah, it's a really big challenge, and I was going to say the system is excellent, but after Kevin speaking, it's only excellent for some, isn't it? And it's so hard to match good treatments to the patient while maintaining value for money. So where do we fail now? Where can the system improve? We need to get the really good stuff to people quickly, and I'll talk about something later if we get the chance about how that's going to work. That's for all patients with cancer. But we fail people with rare cancers. The system is just not designed to assess value for money quickly and in a thorough way to really understand what's value for money for people with cancer of high clinical benefit. So I think if I was changing the system tomorrow, I would make something like Omico testing available for every patient with cancer. If we can't start there, then we need to start with rare cancers, and I think Tracy mentioned that, which is great. So if we want to start there, we focus on rare cancers because, if we want to change the system for individuals with rare cancers, we need to work out what treatments are best for those individuals. And a lot of the time we run blind. I think we're clever enough as a clinical community, both with patients and clinicians, that we can work out what the criteria for that would be so that when something's coming to PBAC for assessment, the criteria aren't as, not rigorous, but aren't as demanding. And I think if we get together and design a system that looks at rare cancers a little bit differently, I think we can improve access and reduce the financial toxicity that so many individuals face.
And so you mentioned the work David's doing. So David, we'll go on to you. The cost of targeted therapy for people with rare cancers is one of the major drivers of financial toxicity, and the work that you're doing has been a leading advocate in precision oncology and access to tumour-agnostic therapies in Australia. What needs to really change to make precision oncology an affordable reality so that we're not having to hear stories of families having to crowdfund?
Well, I think we have to accept that value for money is a critical and necessary part of single-payer healthcare systems. I don't think anybody should feel as though we can do everything for everybody. That's utopian and unrealistic. But I think where the evidence exists, I think we should be creative enough to work out whether something is good value for money. And one of the issues is for rare cancer patients, particularly these tumour-agnostic therapies, all of the data that's been generated have been what are called single-arm studies. So they were designed for the Food and Drug Administration. They assess effectiveness and safety, and you only need single-arm data to show that something has a response rate of 38%, for example. The problem is that in single-payer healthcare systems, we need time-to-event analyses to create something. The universal language for HTA in every single-payer healthcare system is the amount of money it costs to extend life by what is called a quality-adjusted life year. And since we've got single-arm data, we can't estimate that for the tumour-agnostic therapies. And I think I've got some data which I wanted to share with the audience, because there are now 9...
There we go. There's your slide. It's just popped up.
So I wanted to share this with you because these therapies, the so-called FDA-approved tumor-agnostic therapies, there are now 9 of them. There are another 15 or so that are in development. The drug targets for these agents occur in 1 in 5 rare cancer patients. And the data, certainly for 9 of them, has been done. It will never be reproduced. You'll never be able to randomize a patient onto the control arm of these studies, because we know these drugs work. What I wanted to show you here is our own data after 25,000 patients going through the program. This is the rare cancer population within our program who have gone on to receive one of those 9 FDA-approved therapies. And if this were lung cancer and the control arm was patients with lung cancer who didn't receive the treatment, this would get approved instantly. There's a doubling of survival for the patients that have got access to these therapies.
So just take us through what we're seeing, just so the audience can understand the data.
Yeah, sorry. So this is a Kaplan-Meier curve. What it shows is at time 0, everybody's alive. And by the time you get out to the 5-year time point, we've been going for 9 years now, at the 5-year time point, at 60 months, only about 1 in 5 patients are still alive. The red line shows the patients who've received one of these FDA-approved or candidate FDA-approved therapies, which we find in 1 in 5 patients. And you can see in the fuzzy lines below is 100 iterations of people who are identically matched to those rare cancer patients, 1-to-1, they're identical, who did not receive one of those therapies in our cohort. And there is not one of those control lines which overlaps with the treatment arm. Now, this is the sort of data for rare cancer patients which ought to be used to estimate how many dollars it costs to extend these patients' survival by 1 quality-adjusted life year. And it ends up being around $40,000 per quality-adjusted life year, which is
very acceptable.
Well within the remit. Now, the question is, if we're prepared to speak the language of value for money by being imaginative and creative and using data, where's the barrier to getting this fairly assessed? And this, if we can get it assessed, then it will be available through the PBS so that people like Demi or people out in Dubbo can prescribe these medications rather than having to rely on research programs like ours to provide them. And for this data, it exists. It exists today. It's not as if we have to wait 10 years. This is what I would like to see available for rare cancer patients today.
And just tell the audience a little bit more about Omico and what you do. I mean, most of the people will probably know, but just tell them a little bit about what you do for the people who may not know.
Yeah, so we set up about 7 years ago, we set up a company, non-profit company called Omico, to bind together all the states and territories to be able to act a truly national precision medicine program. And since that time, we've been providing molecular profiling, primarily genomic, but actually increasingly also adding proteomic technologies to patients who've got incurable cancers, who've got nowhere to go. So we've seen 25,000 patients referred, 21,000 patients enrolled, 16,000 patients have received a report, and 2,551 patients have received treatment because of the molecular profiling. And Natalie Willesee is number 3796 in that series. Wow. And she gives a human face, a beautiful, wonderful human face to what those Kaplan-Meier curves show. It can be completely transforming. Yeah.
Amazing. And it really is, I mean, it really shows the difference that it makes. And the fact that this data exists, this is the sort of data that regulators would need to see ideally. And Demi, you've often said this, that the current system is really failing people with rare cancers. As well as seeing this sort of data, what other changes do we need to see so that people with rare diseases like rare cancers aren't left behind in the system?
Yeah. I think so I work with COSA Financial Toxicity Working Group, so a huge program of work trying to build the roadmap. There is a roadmap now to address this issue. One of those small factors within that roadmap is getting medicines to people quickly. You know, when you hear stories about people paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's just heartbreaking. This is just a small program to help solve that bigger problem. It's only focusing on drugs. But with a coalition of wonderful people, industry, clinicians, individuals with cancer, we're developing and putting forward to government a potential interim bridging funding program. Mm-hmm. And what that's about is identifying the medicines which are highly valuable from the outset. We know as clinicians, we see a drug presented at a scientific meeting globally, we know that's going to end up on the PBS eventually. It's just a matter of time. And for rare cancers, you can see those ones as well. You can see the ones with really high response rates, the really beneficial treatments, the stuff that David's shown here. So what we want to put to government is that why can't we, once that evidence is there, why can't we pre-approve those drugs while the system is still assessing their cost-effectiveness and value for money? So we don't stop that system, because that's still very, very important, as David's eloquently said. But why can't we stop people having to choose to pay for a drug while it's getting assessed? Now, there'll be medicines that aren't worthwhile, the medicines that will never be funded, and we have to accept that. But the good ones we should be getting to people quickly. We shouldn't have that financial barrier.
So we've got about 8 minutes left, so just remember, if you've got any questions, pop them onto Slido and I'll prioritise them if they pop up there. So Rachel, just going back to the work that you do with children, you've led major national trials and registries. What does Australia need to do to better integrate the research and the clinical care for children?
Yeah, this is a great question. The greatest hurdle at the moment is the implementation. And that in pharmacogenomics, separate to cancer diagnostics, it's really around the heavily rotating workforce, understanding what to do with those results. In our national trial, we found that was the biggest hurdle. So I think one thing we need to do is those education programs and think about how we educate a workforce that rotates very quickly. The other major hurdle, I think, is for diverse ancestry populations. So in our Marrow registry, we had about 14% of children that weren't enrolled, and they were consistently from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. We know that Australians speak over 300 languages, and so addressing why that exists and the cultural hurdles around that is really important, both from a consenting perspective but also from an education perspective. And that's two things that we're focused on moving forward.
Amazing. So just looking ahead a little bit, I'll ask all the panellists, how can government and industry and patient groups, and we've got lots of patient groups in the audience today, work better together to ensure that the promise of personalised care that we've heard about this morning becomes a reality for everybody, not just those who can afford it? Seth, maybe I'll start with you. What would you like to see in terms of more collaboration?
Yeah, I think it's... I think it requires an effort from, all levels, really. So, I mean, a lot of these technologies are enabled by genomics. So really all the things that I work on are fundamentally enabled by genomics on this, actually understanding what the different the variations in the diseases that are out there. So I think having increased advocacy for things like genomic testing becoming very standard, and also enabling patients, I guess, to contribute to that dialogue with government and really push government to be more, and policy to be a bit more nimble. So with new technologies like the mRNA cancer vaccines, they require us to rethink traditional regulatory approval.
Yes, so those traditional approaches and the traditional regulation that can take literally years when the science is moving so much quicker.
Yeah, so in the case of an mRNA cancer vaccine, they're looking at basically delivering these 31 days after diagnosis so that they create the drug.
Wow.
So to do that will require total reform of the way that we actually do this kind of medicine. So we need to be getting results really quickly. We need to have streamlined approvals. And I think this is where patient communities and things like that can really play a pivotal role in advocating for, I guess, reforming some of those kind of policy guidelines that we have at the moment to make sure that we can actually take advantage of these technologies. Because, I mean, you can do all the science you want, but unless there's actually a system that's set up to actually translate it into the clinic, then it's not actually going to go anywhere. So I think that's really an opportunity where patient advocates and things can play a really large role.
And we're going to hear from some patient advocates in one of our next sessions. Just on the collaboration front, Demi, did you have anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some great examples already that we're doing. So let me just take you through one at the moment. And while we're getting precision medicine, we don't have it now, which is unfortunate. I think there are great examples of what we can do. So we work in clinical groups like I do, the Medical Oncology of Australia, with industry and consumers. we can help advise government, PBAC, about what treatments we need to get to patients. An example at the moment, it's been mentioned today, so let me raise it again, the fact that the 2 companies put forward immunotherapy to get broader access, which will help people with rare cancers. While Keytruda being rejected, but the other drugs, ipilimumab and nivolumab, being deferred, I think that deferral is real positive. And while we want to match the right treatments with the right patients, we want to get that genomic profiling so we know that people aren't wasting their time. Absolutely really important, wasting their time on a treatment that doesn't work. I think the current potential negotiation that's happening between that company and the government for broad access to immunotherapy for rare cancers is a real positive thing. I'm talking directly to the Minister here. I think we shouldn't, while it'd be great to have more defined and tests that guide us about what treatment, we should be pragmatic about it and perhaps rely on clinicians with the current best evidence we have to prescribe to the right patients. But I think that's a great example of what we can do already while we're waiting for the genomic stuff to become mainstream.
So can I just add one thing as well? Is like, I mean, even for me personally, hearing the stories from patients and carers like Natalie and Kevin, when paired up with data like that's David's presenting, I think creates a much more powerful story than just the data by itself. Yep. So I think, when the people that we're speaking to are regulatory authorities and ultimately into politicians, having that personal element that comes from the patients and the advocates and the carers is much more impactful than just having the science alone.
Yeah, and that's something we're going to be canvassing in our afternoon session, actually. We're going to be canvassing that exact point about balancing storytelling, the patient stories with the actual data. And just on the collaboration point, Rachel, did you have anything to add in the children's space? How important it's been to have good collaboration between the different sectors to get things like the Zero Childhood Cancer Initiative off the ground?
Yeah, childhood cancer is so rare, we have to collaborate for everything.
But that can be a real strength, though. That can be a strength, too, to see people all on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's imperative, and we have to, our collaborative groups, the trials that we run are all international in this space. One thing I think we could probably work cross-pollinate into the adult world is more around the digital reform. And I really love the idea from Genomics England of patients having a genomics app where they are the custodian of their own data. And I just feel like that would be a huge a pathway to overcome such major implementation issues, but involves collaboration beyond the paediatric sector.
So we've got 1 minute left, so I just want to go through each of the panellists and ask them, if there's one change that you'd like to see in the next 5 years that you think will make the biggest difference for rare cancer patients, what would it be? And David, we'll start with you.
I'd like to see a creative, intelligent, evidence-based approach to evaluating tumour-agnostic therapies for the rare cancer and CUP population. The drugs are there right now. There's no science required. It's a question of how we evaluate it and get it into routine practice.
And Demi?
I think genomic profiling for everyone with cancer. You get your PET scan, you get your blood tests, you get your history from your doctor, all your family history. It's now, I think, we've reached the point where this is should be a standard part of the information we need to make good decisions for treating patients.
So it becomes a standard part of the clinical pathway and Seth?
Yeah, I totally agree with both of what they said as well. But I think maintaining our regulatory flexibility. So Australia is actually one of the best places in the world to develop new medicines because it's much easier to start early stage clinical trials here than pretty much anywhere in the world. So I think maintaining and enhancing that system really allows us to stay at the forefront of new medical technologies.
So sometimes it's harder to do the larger scale trials, but the early stage ones.
But the early stage, Australia is number 3 in the world, behind only America and China in phase 1 trials, and that's because of regulatory flexibility, easier manufacturing requirements, and of course our healthcare system.
And I think that's good to focus on that strengths-based approach of thinking about what we are already doing well that we can leverage. And Rachel?
I think deepening our understanding and openness to the diverse ancestry populations in genomics.
Yeah, so that we're getting a really full and proper picture of the diversity of the Australian population, not just the select few who might have access to getting their genome sequenced. Alrighty, look, we could keep chatting for hours, but please give our panel a big, big round of applause.
Well done.
Thank you.